Hello and welcome to this repair tutorial, and today we're going to look at an Arcam and the model number is Alpha 8R. In terms of general specifications, power output RMS is 50 watts per channel, and that's if you're going to connect an 8 ohm speaker load. Frequency response is 20 Hz to 20 kHz, and then total harmonic distortion is 0.01%. The amplifier has a switchable input where you can select between the auxiliary input, or if you're going to connect a turntable, it should have a moving magnet type cartridge, and your maximum input millivolts is 3 millivolts, and then for all of your other line inputs they come in at 275 millivolts. Then your preamplifier output is 0.5 volts, and in terms of speaker impedance the minimum is 4 ohms up to a maximum of 16 ohms, and then dimensions, height, width and depth is 85, 430 and 330 millimeters, and the amplifier weighs approximately 4.5 kilograms. It is supplied with a remote control, so that can be used to increase or decrease the volume, and you can also place the amplifier into mute mode. All the input selection is done via the manual selection. You can also have a direct mode, so that means that it will defeat the tone control circuits. You have individual bass, treble and balance controls, and a headphone socket, 1/4 inch jack for private listening, and then you can also connect a tape to it, and then you have the momentary push button, which is just in between the input selection switch and the volume control. So if we sort of take a look at this amplifier with the top cover removed, the board layout is excellent, so you don't have the same issue that you see with many other brands, where for example electrolytic capacitors are mounted very close to power components, resulting in heat transfer and the reduction in life expectancy of the capacitors. All the capacitors typically are Rubicon, and you will find that even if these amplifiers are maybe 30 or 40 years old, if you check the ESR and the value of the capacitor, you'll find that they're well within manufacturer's tolerance. What you see in here is the selectable input, which I mentioned earlier. You can see at the rear that there is a push button, and then if you just toggle that push button, as I said, you'll select between a moving magnet type cartridge for your turntable or back to a typical input which is for your line. Just be aware what that selection setting is. If you connect, for example, a line input, you could find that it's heavily distorted because the switch is in the alternative position. Now, in terms of stripping down the amplifier, it is straightforward. So what I've done here, I've just removed the front control knobs, and then you have a number of fixing screws. So to remove the front bezel, they're just on the left and right hand side, and there's 4 in total. And then you just unclip it and just make sure that you undo the clips underneath the amplifier, and then you can put it to one side. If you're going to remove the main board, you don't have to remove the clamps which are mounted on the output MOSFETs. What you can do is just simply remove the fixing screws for the back panel, and then also you'll find that there is a series of fixing screws holding the main circuit board via a common ground connection to the bottom of the chassis, and then there's just 2 fixing screws which are at the top towards the front bezel, which just holds the frame in place. Now, what was the issue with this amplifier when it came into the workshop? Well, what you can see here is I've just taken an extract from the service manual, and what I'm focusing in on is the balance control circuit. Now, the customer reported that the right hand channel seemed to be working correctly, but the left hand channel was really no audio at all, and if the balance control was operated, you had some loud noise coming through on the left hand channel, but predominantly the audio was coming through on the right. If you took the balance control out of circuit, what the issue was that one of the gangs of the balance control had broken away. So in terms of what is the specification of that control, well, it's a dual 10 kb centre dent potentiometer which has a knurled shaft, and it's a split type. Now, there are different types of balance control potentiometers, and I'll put a link in the video just to provide more information for people who may be interested in types of potentiometers. For this one, if you set the balance control to a midpoint and measured between the 2 outer terminals, then nominally it would read 10 k ohms. If you connected one of the multimeter probe leads to the center pin, again at midpoint, it would read approximately half that resistance, 5 k ohms. Just be aware of that, because there are some potentiometers which we term as center zero. So you just need to make sure that it is a linear type with the center dent, but they are readily available. And then in this photograph here, what you can see is the balance control, and as I said earlier, it had broken away from the board. Now this is a little bit unusual. You tend to find this if maybe the amplifier has been in transit and there's been an accidental maybe drop of the package and it's resulted in this snapping away from the board. I have seen it before, but this amplifier appeared to have no impact damage at all. You know, it was in excellent condition, so a little bit unusual. Of course, if it hadn't snapped off as you see here, the same measurement would have been made in terms of checking the electrical resistance, and if maybe the carbon track or there was an issue with the wiper of the potentiometer, then that would have been picked up. So a relatively straightforward repair to resolve that issue, just simply installing a brand new potentiometer, fix the issue then with the left and the right channel. Now, as with all of these tutorials, what I always ensure is that I provide a lot more information than just fixing the fault. So on this photograph, you can see just to the right hand side, you can see the Omron 24 volt relay. Now, it's very, very important when these amplifiers come in for repair and service that you carry out all of this additional work just to ensure that when it goes back to the customer has good reliability and good life expectancy. So in theory, it should run for many, many years. When you remove the main amplifier board from the chassis, if you look from the bottom left, these are the RCA input sockets, and they always have dry joints and cracks around them, so you need to resolder. And the same also applies for the speaker terminals and also for the MOSFETs. Those are the circles which are just in front of what look like two black grills. And then as you move towards the front of the amplifier, looking away, the first one is the headphone socket, and then the three potentiometers, balance, treble and bass. You'll also find the selection switches as well for the time defeat, and then also the tape and the speaker set 2. And then also the input selection switch. You will need to resolder that, but remember that gets done because we'll have to remove it and clean it, which you'll see in a moment. And then the other two smaller circles, those are the plus and minus 15 volt regulators, and again you'll need to reflow because typically because of the heat the solder joints start to crack and break down. Now on the 8R, what you have on the rear is a selection switch, and this selection switch just simply switches between processor or normal. Now what this does is it just sets the gain at a fixed value, and typically this was done when you had like AV units which could be connected to the amplifier. Now with this switch what you'll always find is that there is heavy oxidization, which you'll see in a moment. And then just to the left hand side, that's just where I'm circling the speaker protection relay that you saw a moment ago, if you're wondering where the location of that is. So it's just a straightforward replacement. And then here you can see that processor stroke normal switch has been removed, and you can see the slide contacts, and they are heavily tarnished. And also as well, there's some lubricating grease which would be put on when it was manufactured, and this dries out. So just use a fiberglass pencil, rub it up and down the contacts, and then use a De-Oxit just to clean it up, and then reassemble. And that just ensures that you have a very, very positive connection. Because it's setting the gain within the amplifier, you just need to make sure, of course, that that contact is as close to zero resistance as possible. You don't want it having intermittent or maybe drifting around, because that's not going to be good for the amplifier, and you would hear that within the audio output. And then we also mentioned as well the input selection switch. Now this is common on all of these amplifiers, and you can go all the way back to the Arcam 2, Arcam 3. It's a straightforward task. You just remove it from the circuit board, release the locking nut from the front metal cage, and then just take a small set of side cutters, and I just use it just to peel back the prongs where it holds it up to the back plate. And then each one of these wafers is taken apart, and again we just use De-Oxit with a fiberglass pencil to clean each one of those up and then reassemble. And then what you'll find is you have excellent life expectancy, as I said previously, and you're not going to have any issues with intermittent loss of sound. Normally such problems are associated in three different areas. You could have cracks on input RCA sockets, you could of course have an issue with the input selection switch, or maybe there's an issue also with the dry solder joints on the input selection switch because these pins are very, very small, or maybe the speaker protection relay has oxidization and the contacts are worn. But as you probably gather from these tutorials, we take care of all of these different areas, so when you test the amplifier, no issue is present. And then once that is done, of course what we need to do is we need to just put the amplifier through final alignment. Now we hadn't replaced the output MOSFETs on this amplifier, and they were all original. But again, I show you an extract here from the service manual, and this is the right channel. And what I'm pointing to is the bias or preset potentiometer, which is used to set what will be the current flowing through the output MOSFETs. Now the way in which you do the measurement is when you look onto the circuit board, you'll find that there are two resistors and they're in parallel. So all I've done is I'm just connecting here across one of the resistors, and you can see that it's 0.22 ohms. Leave the amplifier running probably for about 20 minutes, and then what I then do is I just make the adjustment then with the preset, until it's within the desired range. So here it's about 2.3 millivolts up to a maximum of 2.8 millivolts. And then here what you can see is that one of the channels is coming at 2.77 millivolts and then the other channel is 2.74 millivolts. So there's no requirement for adjustments. So the output MOSFETs are not being overdriven, and as I say, all within factory specification then. Now the other work that was also done is to clean all of the user controls and the mechanical switches with De-Oxit, and that just ensures that you have good reliable operation and also noise free, and also the headphone socket was also cleaned as well, because you can get over time just oxidization building up onto the contacts. And then as with all repair that come into the workshop, the next part is really just to put the amplifier into a functional test. So it runs normally for about 3 to 4 hours just to ensure that the amplifier is performing well and no issues at all. And then the final part, of course, is just to give the amplifier a thorough clean. As I said, this amplifier was in extremely nice condition, so it's really a joy to restore it, and it will go back to the owner, and no doubt it also forms part of a good stack system, probably with excellent speakers being connected, etc. So that sort of brings us to the end of this repair tutorial. So as always, I appreciate you stopping by, and if you require any help, support or assistance, by all means email audioamplifierservicing@aol.com, and I'll be more than happy to come back to you and provide any assistance or guidance that you may require. So until the next time, I wish you all the very best. Cheers and bye bye.